Sorry, that Assalamu alaikum. That was my daughter's login.
Alaikum assalam. Okay, inshallah, we're going to get started. Just to make sure.
Okay, I think you are spotlighted. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome. Inshallah, we're going to get started with our normal dua. It's good. It's going to stay, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise is due to God, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. We intend to learn and to teach, to remind and be reminded, to benefit and be benefited, to improve and be improved, to encourage holding fast to the book of God and the way of his messenger, and to call to guidance and to direct towards good, hoping for the countenance of God and his pleasure and his proximity and his reward, and peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. So inshallah, today we're going to continue from where we left off, and I'm okay with just holding this. I'm fine with just, it's just floaty.
Is it floating this way too much?
Floating, it's just floating towards the, yeah. I don't mind taking it out. I think it'll come out, the sound will come out a little better. Let's do this. Yeah, this is easier for me anyways, inshallah. So before we get started, if anyone wants to share what the assignment was from last week. And yes. To have a positive opinion of everyone as much as we can, right, in our hearts. A good opinion, husn al-dhann bin nas. And does anyone have any reflections they'd like to share about this particular assignment?
So I was at the self-checkout at the store paying for something, and I noticed that the supervisor of that area was like staring at me very aggressively. And so to be honest, my first thought was, oh my God, I think someone's stealing something, it's suspicious, and because I'm Muslim, like every else stuff up in my head. But then I had to change it to be like, oh, maybe she's just looking at me because she wants to like make sure I don't need anything, and maybe she wants to be consistent.
MashaAllah. Did it make you feel better?
Yeah.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Any other thoughts or reflections from this assignment? And for those who are online, if you would like to share, you can share in the chat box as well. Welcome, Auntie Nahid. We're so happy to see you. Alhamdulillah. Hey, Sylvia?
You know, a situation and someone kind of they blurted something they shouldn't have blurted out. So, then first my conclusion was like, oh, he must not be able to happen. So then later I realized, no, I gave you more ability to defend it without realizing that a lot on the things. Because, you know, it just helps you defend it to make a judgment and intention of it. So I think that's important as well. Just witnessing that, I think.
MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. Did anyone struggle a little bit with the assignment? Yeah. in my own case, something came up for me from a long time ago. Wasn't even, that was something I thought I had, was out of my system, had forgotten about it, forgiven and forgotten and moved on and all of that. And all of a sudden something comes up and I'm like, this is still here, And so, so then I was like, okay, have a good opinion. I was working on this, trying to have a good opinion. I was like, for some reason, I'm really struggling to have a good opinion. And maybe it's because of the distance of like time and stuff and something so long ago. And then I made dua that Allah helps me to have a good opinion. And then what I found was, as I struggled with this, I found that if I would make dua for the person, whoever that, that the person that was struggling to assume things in a good way, just to make dua for them continuously, then the good opinion, it's interesting because usually you do that to get rid of a grudge. But this was actually helpful to have a good opinion, to believe the sort of like the positive excuse to make for someone. So that's making dua for them was actually what was helpful to be able to hold that good opinion. Like, so that it's not just like I have it for a second and then the bad opinion comes back. No, how do you like maintain the good opinion is continuously, hopefully, to try to make dua for them. So that was my own struggle, but that was a surprise. But I was very grateful not to have any new situations show up in the week where I'd be like, having to struggle for something new around the corner that I wasn't expecting. It's a little bit easier to actually to work on something old. Alhamdulillah. If there are any, yeah.
I had a question that yeah. So I had an interesting experience with someone, and like, what's the difference between su'uban and trying to understand why a person reacts the way that?
Mm-hmm. So su'uban is like you're assuming the worst of their motives, and you're assuming the worst of their of all of those reasons. But if you're trying to understand a why, like as a means of maybe being of help to them, then you would try to actually empathize. Like, what's something very valid that they're feeling, and if I were in their place, if those things happened to me, I would probably feel those things too. Maybe I wouldn't like react in the same way, or I don't know if I would because I'm not in their shoes. But just like you're trying to empathize with the experience of the other person, just to like feel the pain or the stress or the difficulty of whatever that is, and then like su'adhan is different. It's more like you've made a judgment about their behavior and about where it's coming from. It's coming from a place of judgment. It's not coming from a place of empathy.
If you are placed in a situation like that, how do you turn and like that limbo state into
Because you're able to empathize, or after you've empathized. Well, when you've empathized, you're trying to feel the pain or the stress or the whatever it is. And so if you can get there, you don't like you want to help them from alleviate that pain or that, and that's a different response than kind of like being angry with them or judgmental, or it doesn't mean you're like you look at their behavior and say it was right. It wasn't the best behavior, but you're not coming at it from judgment. You're coming at it from, okay, maybe this came from a lot of pain, and or it came from being very, very stressed out or anxiety or whatever it is, and then trying to soothe that without validating something that's wrong, right? So, okay. We just pray like whenever people come in. That's why I think that if you would like to, you can pray on the side. No problem. Our old majlis spot had many rooms people could just duck into when they came in late for class or later on or after prayer. Any other thoughts or reflections from the assignment? Okay, so we also have another really awesome, alhamdulillah, we had a community member. Oh, we have a reflection here. Okay. It says, I struggled this week and benefited from someone else reminding me in the moment. It was a reminder to keep good company who will keep me accountable. Okay, mashallah. So sometimes having a good companion, right, is the one who reminds you to have the good opinion when you're beginning to go down a negative road, a bad road. And it's interesting, right, because there are people who will, there are friends who will encourage you to do worse. So the person may be in a state of doubt, like, would you think someone so-and-so meant anything by that? And their friend will be like, yeah, of course, they're just so jealous of you, right? This is like American TV shows, right? Or like teenagers and stuff, right? So the response is, oh yeah, I could tell they were jealous from the way they were looking at you. So you have a friend who's like literally like waswas of shaitan, right? That's like not a good companion, because those are not the thoughts you want your friend to tell you. You want your friend to tell you thoughts like, maybe she was having a bad day. I didn't notice anything. Maybe she's tired. Sometimes people are just awkward, you know, all sorts of different excuses that, and this is the interesting thing is a lot of these excuses tend to be right. Like some people are just awkward. They don't mean anything by the way they are. You want a friend who can help you, right, to maintain a good opinion, inshallah. There's a story of actually someone who's now a teacher who studied overseas, but they, before they were Muslim, this is when they were Muslim, but they had newly converted. And so they used to sell like where they were, they used to sell things like sneakers and t-shirts and stuff like that on the side of the road, and make a lot of money from that kind of like, basically like shop that was there. And forgot what happened, the whole story as it goes, but apparently like when they were dealing with someone, so a bunch of their things got stolen by like a gang that they used to know, and they called their friend, they told, you know, these people came and they stole, and they were like, oh, you shouldn't let anyone do that. And the person said, I picked up the phone, I called the wrong person, right? He picked up the phone and he called someone who was not Muslim, and he had just converted. He's like, if I had just picked up the phone and called like my Muslim friend, they would not have told me what they told me. His non-Muslim friends like, are you gonna let them do that to you? So he's literally running after these people in the streets, car chase, shooting out of the, literally like a, you know, he gets imprisoned for it. His big reflection was like, when you're in a difficult situation, be careful who you pick up the phone and call, because it could have gone in either way, you know, at that moment. And he was a new convert too, so it was just, you know, obviously a test, but you know, at the same time, alhamdulillah, he's fine now, but and he's doing well in every way, mashallah. But just that's something that I remember thinking about it as like that seems like dramatic, could be like a movie scene, right? But there's moments in life that have some drama to them, right? And who you pick up the phone, who you reach out to, that's going to have a big impact. Okay, so we're going to pull up the verses for this week, inshallah. So last week we finished all of verse 31, right? Oh, there was a trivia question. Okay, so trivia question from last week. So here is what whoever gets this right, someone has donated this present for class today for whoever gets this right. I'm gonna pull it out of the box. It is a beautiful little journal that has the Majlis on it, the Majlis logo, and a matching Majlis pen. It's very pretty. So whoever gets this right will get to win this wonderful prize. Thank you for the sister who donated it. The question from last week is, there is a veil from the 19 veils, right, that are over the heart, that distances a person from God. One of these veils repeats. And it repeats in the beginning, it also repeats at the end. What is that veil? And with which other like sort of spiritual disease is it paired with when it's mentioned the second time? First person to get it. I'm not sure. Does Ahlam count? No, of course you count. Yes, it's Hesed. And what is the veil? What is the second one that it is paired with?
I know it's the last one.
Rabia? Delusion, that's right. Okay, so the thing is we only have one book. We have two people. I think you guys have to do rock, paper, scissors. What was that? Yeah, but then only they could answer it. So that the rest of the class. Okay. Congratulations, Rob. You can use it in the upcoming Lanterna retreat. And just take a picture of it and be like, I'm taking Lanterna notes in a Majlis journal. All right, so inshallah, today we're going to go to, we're going to finish the verses that we were supposed to do, which is 32 through 37. And then we're also going to, in the same session, inshallah, we will do the spiritual commentary from Imam Ibn Ajiba on these verses. So last week, this is a section that is done together. So I'll just read the translation of the first verse and then I'll go to the others. In verse 31, and we have appointed none but angels as wardens of the fire, and we have not appointed their number, save as a trial for those who disbelieve, to grant certainty to those who have been given the book and increase in faith to those who believe, and that those who are given the book and the believers will not doubt, and that those in whose hearts is a disease and the disbelievers will say, what does God desire by this as a parable? Thus does God lead astray whomsoever he will, and guide whomsoever he will, and none knows the hosts of your Lord but he. It is but a reminder for the human being. And then the verses for this week is, nay, by the moon, by the night as it withdraws, and by the morning as it brightens. Truly it is one of the greatest, as a warner to the human being, for those of you who wish to go forth or stay behind. So by the moon, Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions here again that Allah swearing by the moon is, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who owns all of creation, swears by his own creation, and he swears by signs within his own creation. And he says, Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says, nay by the moon actually means nay by the greatness of its benefit. This is just a side point, but there's a tradition of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ where he says that the difference between the scholars and the worshippers is like the difference between the full moon on a dark night, right, compared to the rest of the heavenly bodies. What he means is like if you're out in the, if you ever seen, I've been outside on a dark night and there's a really bright full moon, it actually, that light guides everyone. You can walk by it, you know where to go, so it brightens up the whole world. But also it kind of, its brightness makes it so that the stars that are kind of around it are engulfed in its light. So there's that. And here it's not just scholars of information. This goes back to our discussion that we do on Sundays, the one about the true sheikhs. It's like the scholar who's really embodied in a very in a very serious way the example of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, his sunnah, and is one of his inheritors. So here by the moon, and by the greatness of its benefit, and then by the night as it withdraws, Imam Ibn Ajiba says here the language is adbar, is like as it turns away. So there's kind of like an imagery of the night like walking away or turning away. And by the morning as it brightens. And here he says as it slows or as it is revealed. And so the imagery of the morning coming is like very gentle and very gradual. It's not swift. And then also, nay expresses a rejection of those who suppose that they can know the number of the hosts, right? So why, like after talking about the 31st verse, which talks about the 19 angels around hellfire and how this is going to increase belief for people who believe, and it's going to be an issue of doubt or questioning for the people who disbelieve. The fact that the next verse starts with kalla it expresses rejection of the people who have, like the 19 guardians of hellfire cause them doubt. And it says rejection of those who suppose that they should know or they can know the number of God's hosts, or that they can overcome them. And we mentioned the story of how one of the, like Abu Jahl was like, oh, we can, 19 soldiers, we can easily overcome 19 soldiers. And then I think one of the people that was with him said, I can take care of 17 by myself. The rest of you guys can handle the last two, or something like that, like very arrogant. So this kalla is a rejection to that attitude of like, either that they can know the soldiers of God, or the guardians of hellfire, or that the belief that they can overcome them. And this is mentioned in the tafsir of Imam al-Alusi and Imam al-Tabari. He says also, this is one of several passages in which an oath is taken on the moon. So, and also on the alternation of night and day. So there's many verses in the Qur'an that talk about this. We've talked about it before in previous surahs, and this is a repetition of that. The next verse, so there is the verse 32 is swearing by the moon. And then verse 35 is what it is swearing to, okay? So if you imagine it like, this is called in Arabic, jawab al-qasam, right? The answer to the swear. So imagine if someone said, wallahi, right? And then they don't say anything else, right? They swear by God, but then you don't know what they're saying that for. Like, you don't know what's the jawab al-qasam, like what are you swearing to, right? You're swearing by God, but what are you swearing to? So here, Allah is swearing by the moon, right? And by the night, and by the morning. And then he's swearing to, right? After 3 swears, he's swearing to something, which is truly it is one of the greatest. And then there's a difference of opinion about what it is. It can either refer to saqar, which is one of the names of hellfire. And it can mean that saqar itself is one of the greatest calamities. Saqar is one of the greatest. And then the noun, the adjective is there, but the noun is removed, and it's what's assumed is calamity. And that's actually a way of sort of emphasizing the point. Also, some understand that this way of saying it, and this is also in the tafsir of Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says that it's as though it's saying it is only one of the calamities. And that means that these types of calamities will be endless. It can also refer to the disbelievers' denial of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, meaning that such denial is one of the greatest sins. So that's the second position. And that's in the tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi. So truly it can mean the denial of the Prophet is one of the greatest sins, as a warner to the human being. And this can mean a few things. Again, there's a difference of opinion. According to some of the mufassirin, this verse, as a warner to the human being, comes as what's described as a distant adverbial clause that continues the command in verses 1 and 2. So let's go back to verses 1 and 2 very quickly. Verse 1 says, "O you who are covered, arise and warn," right? And then you have all of this, the rest of the surah. And then it continues after arise and warn, as a warner to the human being. So that's one of the opinions, that it's like a continuation. It's called an adverbial clause. That's in the tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi. But most mufassirin actually believe that they view this verse in relation to the previous verse. And they believe it indicates the gravity of saqar, the gravity of this part of hellfire. And that saqar itself serves as the warner. So truly saqar is one of the greatest calamities as a warner to the human being. And others say that the creation of saqar is an indication of an attribute of God's power. So warner is somehow an indication of the power of God in his creation of punishment. Or it can also be understood as it referring to saqar as one of the greatest calamities, and this is coming to everyone through the Qur'an, which is warning mankind. So again, the third opinion being that it's a reference to the Qur'an. And then verse 37. For those of you who wish to go forth or stay behind. To go forth means to proceed in faith, goodness, and obedience, while to stay behind means to remain in disbelief, denial, insist on evil and disobedience. And though this can either be, or when it says for those of you who wish, the word here is liman sha'a, right? Sha'a is an indication of the human being having willpower, right? For those of you who wish to go forth. And to some extent, it shows that, and Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions this, is that Iman, having faith, believing in the truth, is a choice. And then also to go forth is a choice, to go forth and doing good. To stay behind, and staying behind meaning to stay behind and not do good things, or stay behind and do bad things, is also a choice. There's one opinion that says, it thinks whether the person is going forward or staying behind, it both refers to something good. So the one who wants to proceed in doing bad, or yata'akhir, to stay behind from disobedience, meaning they leave the disobedience. So linguistically, it can actually apply to either. But the meaning is there in terms of you have the willpower and you have the choice to do good. And yasbiq ila al-khair, which means to race with each other towards good or in good, aw yata'akhkhar anhu, or to stay behind from it completely. And I remember once I was sitting with a teacher and I was sitting with the teacher's wife, and we were talking about different kinds of programming and things. And I don't know, if she read it on my face or something, because I was just thinking about man, this is a lot of work, what we were talking about. And I remember her saying, you could just go home and kick your feet up and watch TV like everyone else is. I was like, yeah, I kind of want to do that. But her point was doing good requires willpower, right? And not doing good also is giving in to just, what people can give into. They stay behind from it. So it's your choice. That was her point. It's your choice. You want to do something good, then come and do it. Otherwise, you could go stay behind, stay home, kick your feet up on the couch and watch TV. It was such a terrible scene in my mind compared to what we were talking about. She shamed me in a good way. It was a good shaming. And so one thing Imam Ibn Ajiba also mentions is that it's important to remember that our mashi'ah, which is our will or our wish, is still tied to the mashi'atullah, is still tied to the will of God. And so we do have the choice to do good, and we do have the choice not to, but we don't believe that we are majboor. Majboor is a person who believes they're majboor would say, God forced me to do the sin, We don't believe in that. We still believe that we have choice. And this is from the secrets of Qadr, right? The divine decree. So there's a theological group would be described as a deviant group. They're called the Jabariyah. And they would say that the bad people are bad because God forced them to be bad. And the good people are good because God forced them to be good. Jabariyah means I have no choice. It's majboor, right? Everyone is only playing out something that they cannot escape from, and they actually have no choice at all. And we don't, Ahl Sunnah or the Sha'ira, we don't actually believe, we don't believe that. We do believe we have choice, but we also believe in the divine decree. And we've discussed this many times in the tafsir class. I don't feel like I have enough coffee in my system today to go into it again, but inshallah, if you have questions, we can do it at the end. There's a point that's related to this. I think it's going to come up in the discussion from Imam Ibn Ajib. So this idea of being on a path where you wish to go forward, or you have a willpower to go forward, or you desire not to go forward. If you go back to the 31st verse, it's kind of كذلك يضل الله من يشاء ويهدي من يشاء. Thus does God lead astray whomsoever he will and guide whomsoever he will. So here's a question. If God is leading people astray, why are they punished for it? Because they're not majbur. That's right. They chose. فَمَنْ شَاءَ, whoever wants, right? So the person who wants the truth, right? Allah inclines them towards, like, the signs of God will actually increase them in faith. The person who doesn't want the truth, you can show them all the signs in the world, they're going to be in denial, right? And this is how the leading of astray happens. But it starts with the person's own heart either leaning towards truth or against it. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of choose who gets at what sign and what we have the choice in what
Oh, can you repeat the last part of your question?
So
I might need a little bit more coffee for it.
so does that mean that based on what you're saying that Allah chooses who's going to get like what signs or what temptations and then we have to choose how we respond?
So definitely the tests are chosen by God. Our ibtila are in life. Those are part of the divine decree. How we respond to them, yes, has a big part in whether or not we're going to increase in faith or decrease in it. And it doesn't mean that we can make a judgment either in terms of anyone who's living, we have hope for until the moment that they pass away, right? And towards the end of time, actually, a person, it's scary. It's actually quite scary because we're not even supposed to feel like a sense of, we should feel confident in our faith, but we shouldn't feel like I'm so good, I can't be touched. My faith is just so strong, I can never be, and the reason is towards the end of time, a person will wake up a believer and go to sleep a disbeliever, right? A person will be in arm's length between, they'll be doing the actions of the people of paradise for the whole life until there's an arm's length between them and heaven. And then it says their fate will overtake them. And they'll start doing the actions of the people of hellfire, and they'll actually go to hellfire. And vice versa, a person will be doing the actions of the people of hellfire for an entire lifetime. And they'll just be an arm's length between them and hellfire. And then their qadr will overtake them. And then they will do the actions of the people of paradise, and they'll enter paradise. So in these cases, when we're hearing this, we're like, okay, does that mean that we have no control? Because at the end of our lives, like a big test can come. Well, for the person who's a believer, the lesson to take from it is, or someone who has faith, the lesson to take from it is never take it for granted. Always make the choice to continue to renew your faith and strengthen your faith, right? And in whatever ways we can. But also it gives you hope in that we have subhanAllah countless stories, especially people who work in nursing homes and in places where people essentially are passing away. They'll find like a mushaf under someone's pillow, and they're like, this person was like, or like a few weeks before they pass away, they'll discover someone, if they're like a chaplain that's working in these spaces, the person is asking about Islam. And the person will convert to Islam literally a week before they pass away, or 2 weeks before. And I used to hear these stories all the time about, like, subhanAllah, they lived a whole lifetime. One of the things the scholars would say about these people is that because in their heart was still the seed of sincerity, how much they yearned towards truth versus turning away from truth was still stronger. And so Allah allowed them to die on that seed of sincerity. But it is about actually turning towards it and versus turning away from it. And may Allah protect us from turning away from it. I actually think about it in terms of, again, right now I'm teaching high school students and middle school students, and it's temporary, it's substitute type of thing. And I like to think about, like, what inspires rebelliousness? Like, what does it, like, there's things that inspire a person to rebel. What are those things? Because we want to, like, remove that as much as possible. So the temptation to rebel and even to feel like rebelliousness, because rebelliousness is like glorified, right? Like, we live in a society where it's almost like the more rebellious you are, the more independent and strong and nonconformist, right? Like, it has all of the things that are bad qualities, like, bad characteristics for like a Muslim or a believer. They're glorified concepts for young people. So in particular, this quality of rebelliousness, like, how do you, and the thing is, like, young people actually, they're closer to their fitra. So they, like, when truth is presented, I guess, in a way that's not confrontational, they're very easy to accept it. Very, very, very easy to accept it, much more so than adults. I mean, grown-ups, whatever we are, old people. But this quality of, like, I see a true thing and I just want to do the exact opposite. Like, that's like as sort of like a character quality to purify from ourselves and to identify, like, when does that come up? Because that's really a satanic quality. It's like when God told Adam alayhi salam to, like, bow, so Iblis to bow to Adam, and Iblis knew it was the right thing to do, and he just couldn't do it, right? He was held back from doing that. I think about it in terms of what are things that we all know to be right, without exception. We all know it, but we have a hard time doing it. I think saying sorry, saying sorry for when we mess up can be hard. It can be easy with some people, and it can be really hard with certain people in particular. So that's one of them. But if you look at it, it's like, okay, am I going to incline towards the truth right now, or am I going to rebel against it? And in those moments, we have choice. Like, we feel the choice that we have that choice. And there's a reason why we have our hisab. So I'm going to look now. Normally, I don't do this until the week later, but because of where we are in the surah and in the commentary, I'm going to look at the spiritual commentary from Imam Ibn Ajiba on the same verses that we just took. So the spiritual commentary, for those who might be new here, is kind of like symbolic. It's esoteric a lot of times, and it's, I think the benefit is from his commentary is it helps Muslims who want to practice their faith look at verses of the Qur'an and apply them to their own lives, and through a reflective process. And so he looks at the verses and he develops symbols, or he mentions certain symbols that come from the verses, and then through that symbolism, even if the verse is talking about disbelievers and fire and whatnot, Muslims can then go and say, I can apply this to my life, even though I'm not a disbeliever, but there's a quality of the disbelievers that is being described here that me as a Muslim, I want to eradicate, or a quality from the, let's say, the highest of the high that I want to celebrate or emphasize. So here he mentions that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's beautiful names, or from his names, are the majestic and also the beatific. And he says, so he employed his majestic soldiers. And soldiers here, they're a symbol. So if you notice at the end of the verse, it says, and no one knows, it's translated as hosts, but junud literally means soldiers. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُ. So, and no one knows the soldiers of your Lord except for him. And a soldier here is any of God's creation that he employs towards a very particular cause. right? Of guidance for some and also misguidance for others. So he says that he employs his majestic soldiers to pull the people towards the worldly causes of his majesty. So certain people are pulled by these causes or tests. And these are his, he says, the asbab of his majesty. And it's, majesty is like an attribute of God that shows his power, but it's also can be very overwhelming. And he mentions like from the asbab or from the worldly causes that it pulls people towards would be people who are pulled towards disobedience, people who are pulled towards denying the truth. And then he says he employs his beatific soldiers to pull people towards the causes of his beauty. The causes of his beauty are his guidance and obedience. And he did not do this except as a test and an evaluation of, here's the key turn, the key concept. Who will turn away from him and who will turn towards him, right? So these tests come, the same test can afflict two people. And one person is faced with that test and they turn towards God. They're like, God, I really need you right now. I can't pass this test without you. And other people see that test and they say, God, why did you do this to me? Because you did this to me, I'm not going to do anything you told me to do, right? Same test, but they were pulled, two people were pulled in two different directions. And this is, again, an evaluation. It's like, it reveals who's who. And he did not make the guardians of the fire. And he says, this is the fire of being cut off, the fire of qati'ah, except as angels. And they are the guards of being in the divine presence. And they hold the nafs, they hold the self. Now, the person who is inclined to turn away from God, they are thrown into the fire of desires, of their own desires and selfish interests, and they get busy with that. That's what their life becomes. And he says, and we covered this before, and we did not make their number except in 19 veils of spiritual diseases, as a fitna or as a test for the people of negligence. So it veils them from their Lord. So once these people get like busy with everything else but God, that becomes their entire world. They have all these veils over them and they don't particularly even care or notice what's happening. For the one who is purified, though, purified from the veils, they come closer to their Lord through them. So this is interesting, is that there's a person who also has these veils. These are veils that distance them from God, but they look at these veils as, I am like, by my struggle through like ridding myself of these veils, every single one of them is going to be a cause of me getting closer to God. Does that make sense? This is an obstacle course. I'm going to try my best to get rid of every obstacle that's standing in my way between myself and God. And so they purify themselves, or they are purified through the same veils. And so as they are being removed, they become from the people of true knowledge of God. And then they have certainty. They have more than just knowledge of God. They have yaqeen. And once they have this certainty and the veils, and they are purified from these veils, it actually increases them in faith. And he says, this is for, and this is what I think is beautiful. He says, this is for, look at the categories. This is for the spiritual wayfarers. So the person who's like, they're not a scholar, they're not close to a scholar, they're not even a student, but there's someone who's like trying, they're just trying their best. They're spiritual wayfarer. They're going to work on their souls until the day they die because they want to get closer to God. So he says, this is going to increase the faith in the people who are spiritual wayfarers. They're really trying, they're taking the path. And he says, this increases them in faith through their struggle to be purified of them. So even if they're not fully purified of them, the fact that they're struggling against them actually increases them in faith. The very struggle increases them in faith. And in their heart, the person who's purified, in their heart, there remains not a single doubt nor a delusion. This is the person who's fully purified. And he says that the people who have in their hearts a disease, and their disease is something that causes them to have a weakness in certainty or weakness of faith, they ask the question, what does God want by creating the diseases in the hearts of his servants? Like, why do we even have to struggle against these spiritual issues? And it will be said, he wants through them the misguiding of one group from the divine presence by being blocked at the veils, and to guide another group by approaching God through them. And no one knows the soldiers of God that, again, cut people off from him by his irresistible power, or connect people to him by his mercy, except for him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam al-Wartaji, he said, his soldiers, his junud, are actually it's a reference to God's greatness, his magnificence, his power, and his irresistible command that controls all of the soul. Again, junud is a symbolic word that controls everything in the skies and the earth. All, like the birds, the clouds, the trees, everything are from his junud. And he also has soldiers for the hearts of those who know him, and the souls of the people of Tawheed, and the selves of those who simply love him, that destroy every piece of arrogance or stubbornness from the hearts. And here the word junud is going to be something like something that's spiritually beneficial. So I'll give you an example. It's described that if a person, making a lot of salawat is a purification for diseases of the heart, right? People, so like dhikr, for example, is a polish, and it cleanses the heart. There's many different things. So when a person, for example, approaches the Kaaba or goes to the Rawda of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, things are happening there that we can't see, right? But there's definitely purification that's taking place, right? There's places where people are purified. There's actions that purify people. There's people that purify people, right? So there's all these different situations, and it removes the spiritual diseases like arrogance and stubbornness. And he says, and for the lovers of God, right? And for the people of Tawheed, for the souls of the people of Tawheed, and for the selves of the lovers, there are these soldiers for their hearts that are going to help them to know God more. And the warning of saqar is actually the warning of falling into the momentary and temporary desires of the world. And he says that there are those who are callers to these momentary and temporary desires that are the sources of pride in the heart. And it tests the people who are tested by it until they actually fall to, the word that's used in Arabic is al-hadid, which is like essentially like rock bottom. Like they fall to the very bottom of their humanness, because they fell for those momentary and temporary desires. And it's interesting that the temporary can be the source of pride, right? And the eternal is that which cleans out the stubbornness and the arrogance from the heart. And then whoever wants progress towards God, they should do so by fleeing from these things towards him. And whoever wants to stay behind would actually fall into these things and drown in their sea, right? The world sometimes is described as like an ocean, and you're just trying to get through it in a boat, and you're trying to like not allow the water to get into your boat. You guys have heard that analogy. So we're not just trying to like cross it, but there's people who, they see the water and they jump out and they drown. And somehow they think that ocean is their destination, but it's not. So the assignment for this week, as it relates to the verses that we took, is really interesting. It's taken from a reflection of the last verse. لمن شاء منكم أن يتقدم أو يتأخر. Okay, for the one who wants to progress or to stay behind. And so there's this lesson I learned once, which was an important lesson. And I think, inshallah, this is a good week to practice it together, which was, and especially as it relates to this verse, is sometimes we have like an inspiration in our heart to do something that's good, right? Whatever it is, it's like, tonight, go home and read some Qur'an, or go call someone that you know is not having a good time, whatever it is. We have this like little voice that says to do a particular thing that we know is going to be, inshallah, something of benefit either for ourselves or for others. And then there's another voice that doesn't tell you not to do it. It tells you to delay it. It tells you to procrastinate so that you don't do it. Because that voice knows that if you say don't do it, you'll recognize that it's shaitan, is waswas. So it doesn't tell you to not do it. It says, just do it later. And then when later comes, the time for it is gone and you forget about it. So we are going to race with ourselves, inshallah, this week. Whenever we have that little voice tell us to do the good thing, try to do it right then. Like if you have sometimes you're in a situation where like, okay, I'm in a meeting or I'm on a phone call and it happened in the middle of the phone call. Okay, write it down as soon as you're done with whatever that is. Don't be like, I'm going to do it at 5 o'clock tomorrow, or it just as soon as possible. From the time that you have that inspiration, try to get it in. Why? Because inspiration is going to leave. And when it first comes, you actually have the strength to do it. You're like all systems go, right? It's something good. It's not something doubtful. It's not something, should I really do it? Is this going to be of benefit or is this going to cause harm? Nothing like that. It's something that is clearly a good thing. It could be like, you see a launch good for a good cause and you feel like giving to it. Just as soon as it comes to your heart and mind, try to get it in. And don't procrastinate at all for the thing that you're trying to do good for. Go forth. That's the assignment for this week, is go forth. Yes.
My question,
Yes.
so you know how sometimes we're not supposed to do something in like too much quantity if we have like inspiration to do it, just that we're more consistent.
Yeah.
For example, someone who like hasn't read Qur'an in a long time,
Mhm.
feel like just reading like 10 juz at a time,
Mhm.
but we should rather do like 2 pages and keep it out.
Mhm. Mhm.
So like, how do you know the difference between that versus like when you should do something?
Mhm. I would say like if it's going to be like a habit that you want to have as a regular part of your life, then it's okay to scale it down, or even to say, today I'm going to do 10 juz, and tomorrow I'm going to do starting tomorrow I'll do the 2 pages. I won't do the 10. I'll do 2 after. But if it's going to be something that's like consistent, right, then you can scale it down and make sure it's like that. But some things are not going to be a consistent thought. It's going to be like, call your mom, so right now, call her, so or whatever that is, and so the idea is inspiration, when the inspiration hits, to try to answer that as soon as you can. But I would say, like, because I remember the same exact thing, because I used, especially as a younger person, I used to kind of be very all or nothing. And so it was either go hard or go home, don't do it at all or do it all the way. And, you get burnout doing that. But now I kind of miss a little bit of like, okay, if I'm going to go hard, I'll get tired. I'm going to go hard with the intention of, I'm only going hard right now because I have the steam, there's steam in my engine. I'm going to do that. But tomorrow I'm going to go easy. I'm going to go super easy tomorrow, but I'm not going to eradicate it altogether, So, I mean, maybe that's a way to not lose the momentum, inshallah.
We were talking about the story that you told us about the wrong lesson and
Yeah.
that happened at the time. So are there any recommendations you have? Because there's always going to be points in your life where you have a moment where it can be heated and go astray and to prevent you from thinking you do the wrong thing and reaching out to the wrong person. Is there anything to read as a preventative?
I don't know about something to read, but I would say to make dua, definitely to make dua in your time of need. First thing is like, the first one that we call on is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, help me through this. Help me right now. I really feel like doing a lot of bad things, saying a lot of bad things, being bad or in different ways. And I don't want to do that. I have the temptation to do this. Purify me from this and grant me tawfiq in doing what it is you would be most pleased with. And, if there's whoever I should be talking to about this, like bring them into my life, guide me to them so that I may get help from the right person. Like it's good to have good company and good friends already, but in terms of like sometimes a particular test comes and you need very specific advice, that I think turning to God and asking him to really relying on him for the answer can really help us, inshallah. Are there any other thoughts or questions?
Say you have a friend, you have a say you have a friend who you recognize their veils and what they need to do to get closer to Allah, but you don't want to do it anyway. Obviously, I see you as a friend, so you're not going to see your actions as malicious. But what are some ways beyond like dua for them? What are some more active things that we can do to help our friends?
Having them in experiences where they have also get to share in good company, like a good. I'll give you an example. We did the retreat recently at Big Bear, right? And it was not a whole lot of classes. It was like maybe 4 or 5 sessions with Sheikh Walid. There was boating, and for the people who were doing boating and different outdoor activities. And it was just really sharing in each other's company. We had our meals together. It wasn't a lot of lecture, but it was just like a clean environment. It was just like a soothing, nice environment. And also having Sheikh Walid there as a teacher that we can benefit from. If you want to bring a friend into gatherings like that are not, they're not like heavy in the sense of they're like too hard. I thought that was like a really relaxing retreat. Even as an organizer, I was like, I just hung out the whole time. I don't think I even made I think I made 2 announcements the entire retreat. And so it kind of like took care of itself. It was really laid back. But sometimes it's literally just good company. It's just being in a nice environment and the conversation is good, the food is good, maybe there's like very gentle reminders again, and it's not a heavy, serious sort of like seminar. That might be something that just gives them a glimpse into a different kind of enjoyment.
So, say they're more reluctant to go to these guys. It's like this thing. But in their mind, because they've had past experiences with like different gatherings, or they've had other negative experiences. There are any and all gatherings that are deemed Muslim, more reluctant to go to.
Just model as much as you can what it means to be like a good friend. Just as a one-on-one relationship with them, really take care of them, really be a brother to them, really be there for them when they need you. And just that in itself is going to be so much more powerful than a lecture, a talk, or a lesson on veils and whatnot. Just you being a really good companion to them. Inshallah, will be hopefully can with that intention and continuously, obviously, making dua that Allah opens their heart to that. One of the things about like what you said about people having bad experiences, they don't feel safe. They're like, I don't want to try that again. Even if it's something can be called a safe space, but it's just they look and they see people. Like, I want to deal with people right now. I feel like that sometimes, but it's I want to say that human beings still need each other, and so the small friendships, even if it's right now it's just you and them, maybe adding 1 or 2 other people in due time, and they have like kind of like a safe place of good company with you and a few other people. And again, it doesn't mean you have to do lectures. Maybe you're going to go to Colorado with Asnawi and take pictures of the stars, or you're going to do other things, but it's just like good, clean. There's a sister in my MSA, she literally converted to Islam because she attended a sister's party. It was a party. It It was a sisters' Eid party, all sisters. And she had done the research, she had the notebook. She was like literally, because she was looking at Catholicism, because that's where she came from. And she had done all the mental work to be like Islam. Cognitively, she recognized it as being more true than Catholicism. Then she attended a sisters' party. And she came out and she said, I realized I can have fun without being involved in anything bad. And she's like, and she was an organizer for the school for something. And so she always had thought that having fun necessarily meant she had to accept the dark side of things, which is like alcohol and there's like that entire scene. And she was with the sisters for the sisters' Eid gathering. She was like, I realized I could have a lot of fun. There was so much love and sisterhood. And she was like, this felt right. It felt right. And that was after that point. The notebook was already answered with all her questions, but it's like she had to have the experience of like sisterhood. And then she was like, no, this is right. And alhamdulillah, she accepted Islam. Okay, so we'll close inshallah with dua. What's the assignment this week, Sophia? Okay, so inshallah we have more reflections for next week on this one. Everybody, we might have a prize again, inshallah. Okay, we'll close the dua, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى واجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven, not one of us wretched or deprived. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family and companions and followers. Ameen. For those of you online, Assalamu alaikum.